back to Focal Point, AFR Talk, 888-589-8840, number to call. We will take phone calls in the second half of this segment, so sit tight. If you're on the line, hold on. We'll get to you second half of this segment. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk. Do not forget election night coverage right here on AFR Talk. We are going to have the best election night coverage for values voters available anywhere. You're not going to be able to find better values voters coverage of election night than what you'll get right here on AFR. Tim Wildman and Sandy Rios are going to co-host this thing. I'm going to be on there. Dan Celia will be there. Crane Durham is going to be a part of the evening. Fred Jackson, Buster Wilson. We'll have guest appearances by Don Wildman, Tony Perkins, Bishop Harry Jackson, Dr. Robert Jeffress, and others. We've also invited David Limbaugh, General Jerry Boykin, Ambassador John Bolton, and John Fund to be on with us to help provide analysis. So you're going to get minute-by-minute election returns, and this is going to be evaluated from a Christian perspective. And we'll take a look at tweets that you send, Facebook posts, and any other network that's going to bring you the kind of commentary you'll get right here on AFR Talk. That's election night, 6 to 10 p.m., starting at 6 p.m. Central on November 6th. And remember, we've got audio and video streaming available at afr.net. So if you don't happen to be in a place where you've got one of our stations, you can tune us in on the net. We've also got apps for the iPhone, apps for the iPad. We've got apps for the Android, so you can watch as well as listen to our election night coverage. And also, don't forget afaaction.net, afaaction.net, the premier voter guide available in the United States. You're not going to find a more helpful, more usable voter guide than the one you get at afaaction.net. You plug in your zip code, and it's going to pop up the races that you'll be voting on. You don't have to wade through anything. You don't have to sift through pages and pages of stuff. What's going to pop up on your screen are the races that you're going to be voting on. And each candidate is graded. Each candidate has a letter grade based on how their performance in office comports and aligns with a biblical worldview on public policy, afaaction.net. Now, great speech yesterday by Paul Ryan, and I want to play some clips from this. Paul Ryan giving a speech on poverty in the state of Wisconsin. You know, and he made the point that we're involved in a war on poverty, and poverty is winning. That's the observation you made in the middle of the speech. Poverty is winning. We have spent $16 trillion, virtually exactly what our national debt is. Our national debt is equivalent, ladies and gentlemen, to what we have spent fighting the war on poverty. In other words, if we had never started fighting the war on poverty back with Lyndon Johnson, the Great Society in 1965, we'd be dead even. We'd be running a surplus. It is the war on poverty that has impoverished our nation. It's a war on poverty that has created poverty for the United States of America. Now, it'd be one thing if it actually worked. But we have more poor people today than we've ever had before. We have more people on food stamps than we have ever had before. It's gone up 50% under Barack Obama, from 31 million on food stamps to 47 million on food stamps. We are going in reverse. So it'd be one thing if we'd spent the $16 trillion and we had something to show for it, but we do not. And therefore, it's clearly time, I think, for a change of pace. And Paul Ryan just laid out a beautiful, conservative, biblical view of how a society ought to operate. Here is clip number one.
We are here in partnership on behalf of an idea that no matter who your parents are, no matter where you come from, you should have the opportunity in America to rise, to escape poverty, and to achieve whatever your God-given talents and hard work enable you to achieve. In so many ways, our nation's history has been a long struggle to bring opportunity into every life.
So that's the purpose, and that's what we're about, is we're about opportunity. Conservatives are about creating equal opportunity for everybody. We want everybody to be able to exercise their gifts, to use their abilities, to be rewarded for their hard work, their ingenuity, their discipline, their resolve, determination. We don't want anybody held back by a rotten education. We don't want anybody held back by a rotten economy. We don't want anybody held back by a crushing tax burden. We don't want anybody held back by crushing government regulation. So Paul Ryan laying out not just a Reagan-esque view of society, but a Judeo-Christian view of society. Here is clip number 2.
We have to take a hard look at the approach government has been taking for the last 5 decades and ask ourselves whether it's working. With a few exceptions, government's approach has been to spend lots of money on centralized, bureaucratic, top-down, anti-poverty programs. The mindset behind this approach is that a nation should measure compassion by the size of the federal government and how much money it spends. The problem is, starting in the 1960s, this top-down approach created and perpetuated a debilitating culture of dependency, wrecking families and communities. This was so obvious to everyone by the 1990s that when a major welfare program was finally reformed.
Okay, we've got some technical difficulties with those clips from Paul Ryan, and that is a shame because the next clip was just a beauty where Paul Ryan says, look, and he used an example of a guy that is working there in an inner city situation to kind of bring hope, education to inner city kids. And he's living with them. He had a residence center to help get them off the streets, get them an education, start getting them moving on a path to self-reliance. And he and his wife and their 2 kids lived there. They lived there in the same shelter, the same home where these residents came in. And he said, you know what Paul Ryan said in that clip is what you are seeing there, it's not just human beings at work there. He made the point that there is a larger presence that you sense when you go into this place. You go into this facility, and he says that presence is the Spirit of the Lord. And he says government cannot replace what you find in that place. People simply motivated by their love for other human beings and by their faith in the power of God to transform people. And Paul Ryan says, look, you can't duplicate that. You can't replace that. That's got to come from the heart. And he talked openly and unapologetically about what you see in these places where it's voluntary compassion, not compassion measured by the amount of other people's money that the government spends. I mean, that's how liberals measure compassion. Look how much money we've spent. They don't care whether they have any results. It doesn't matter. Results are immaterial to them, whether it actually works or not. In fact, what happens is they use the fact that these programs don't work as an excuse to hit taxpayers up for more money. We just got to spend more money. Look, we're not getting the job done. We still have poverty. We still have more people on food stamps. We got to spend more money to solve this problem. The more money you spend, the more reliant people get on government handouts, the less self-reliant they become, the deeper hole they dig for themselves, and the more appeals then come from these so-called compassionate liberals to dump more money into that pit, which just drives them deeper into the hole. So it's a shame we don't have the rest of those clips, but Paul Ryan just did an absolutely great job of laying out a biblical view of how we deal with these social problems. He says, look, government's duty is not to bail people out. Government's duty is to protect your right to life, liberty, and property, and not to infringe on them. And he used Obamacare as an example of how government is infringing on religious liberty, the right of businessmen to decide what values are going to govern the way they do their own businesses. And he promised again that mandate, that Obamacare mandate that trashes religious liberty in the name of America's health by forcing employers to pay for abortion-causing medications, whether it's against their principles or not, said that mandate will be gone under a Romney-Ryan administration. Got a huge, huge round of applause. Well, let's go back to our phones. Let's go to Ruth in Alpha, Illinois, if we can bring Ruth in from Alpha, Illinois. Ruth, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, I'm originally from Massachusetts, and, you know, the whole Teddy Kennedy Chappaquiddick thing, I just keep hearing that when I think of Obama and Libya.
The Chappaquiddick thing? Now, what are the parallels that you see there?
Well, just, you know, the way originally, you know, Teddy
how the story keeps changing.
Over the bridge and allowed Mary Jo Kopechne to drown, and then the next day, oh no, he was swimming for 12 hours with a broken back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the way that Obama was running around going, oh no, Libya, it was all just a protest gone bad. Oh no, I guess it was an act of terrorism.
Yeah.
You know.
So how the story just keeps changing, and there's obviously a cover-up from the very beginning of the whole deal, and then the whole thing is beginning to unravel. Yeah.
And the way, I mean, Teddy eventually came back, but it put a kibosh on his political career.
Yeah, sure did.
And
He
I-
was finished
and
after
I'm
that.
kind of hoping it's the same thing.
Well, it
taking
certainly
us
could
back.
be. This is very, very bad for President Obama and his reelection efforts. Well, thank you, Ruth. I appreciate the call. Rob, let's grab clip number 5. I told you to set this one up at the beginning of the last segment. I forgot to do it. Are we going to be able to play it, do you think, Rob? Okay, let's give it a shot. This is President Obama's former national security advisor talking about the progress that Obama's made in the Middle East over the last 3 years. Let's listen if we can.
Well, the whole setup for analyzing the world that we face was based on an initial premise that we needed to size up the problems, talk to the people that historically were causing us difficulties, and see if there was some way to proceed ahead. As we now know, in some cases we made some progress. I would cite the START Treaty as an example of a successful couple of years of hard work with the Russians. On the other hand, with the Middle East and Iran, we're probably right back where we were, 3 or 4 years ago.
So there's General Jim Jones, Middle East and Iran. No progress under Obama in 3 or 4 years. Let's go to Brenda, Brooksville, Florida. Brenda, welcome to Focal Point. Got about 45 seconds. What's on your mind?
Okay, Brian. Right quick, the man that's in prison that thinks he's a woman and everything.
Yes, uh-huh.
He doesn't need any of our tax money for his medical care. He gets better care than most Americans have right now.
Yes, he does.
Okay, and another one on the debate, the last debate. I don't know if anybody noticed it or not. When everything was done, and Michelle went up to hug Obama's neck. I don't know what she whispered to him, but he said the words, "I know," and I wish I knew what it was she said to him.
That would be curious to find out. All right, well, listen, Brenda, thank you. Maybe we can find the lip reader that can figure that out. Appreciate that, Brenda. You know, and speaking of guys, I read this story last week, have it in the stack here somewhere, about a guy that tried to rob a bank for $1. He shows up at the bank with a note, says, "I want to rob this bank. I want you to give me $1. Why did he do that? He didn't want to rob the bank. He wanted to go to prison. Why? Health care. 3 hot meals a day. Place to sleep. Game room. Television. Law library. Wanted to rob a bank for $1 just so he could go to prison, get the kind of health care that this guy's got. Focal Point AFR Talk.